Good morning, everybody. This is the October Commission meeting. Do I do an excuse for Commissioner Robel now? Okay, I move to excuse Commissioner Robel. He may show up, but we don't know exactly what's going on. Do we need a roll call on it? Clerk will take the roll.
Commissioner Kern?
Here.
Commissioner Floyd?
Here.
Commissioner Harper?
Here.
Commissioner Miletus?
Here.
Commissioner Posick?
Here.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Here. Okay, our first item is compliance of the stipulated settlement agreements. This is always fun for everybody. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioners. I am Nicole Mitchell, for the record, from APMP, and I'm here to present the stipulated settlements. This morning we have 2 alcohol cases, 6 marijuana cases, and 1 licensing case. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I think I would like to take them, since I have that prerogative, one at a time, because I have some questions if nobody else does. Let's do the first one, please.
The first alcohol case is Rivera Cellars.
Any questions?
No.
If not, make a motion, please.
Chair, I move to ratify the 1 stipulated settlement agreement from Bravura Sellers as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern?
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd?
Yes.
Commissioner Harper?
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus?
Yes.
Commissioner Posick?
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum?
Yes.
The second alcohol case is the Nest Lounge.
Any questions? I have one. This, and to me, it's interesting only from the point of view is a period of 18 months, almost 17 months went by, where this individual had an employee with no license. So we have first, and you know what I'm getting at is we're going to have a discussion later today, and I can't help it. It's in my DNA. I'm bringing this up because it drives me crazy. It says over here that you have no more than, the staff added 2 days of aggravation because the employee worked without a service permit for more than 6 months. This is 17 months. Is there any distinction between 6 months and 17 months? You think this was a conscious effort on the part of this owner to do this? The answer has got to be yes. 17 months don't go by without them knowing that they didn't have this. The other thing that I find more than interesting is that this settlement agreement, there's 17 months that went by. And yet, as a matter of course, we give a 30% reduction because this guy or this gal, whoever owned it, was so wonderful that after 17 months, we decided to give a 30% reduction because that's what we do. I'm bringing this up not because, Nicole, it has nothing to do with you, you know that. But I'm asking the commission members to, at least when we have our discussion later today, to understand that there has to be a distinction between 6 months and 17 months. There has to be a distinction between somebody who inadvertently did something and gets a 30% reduction and somebody who said 17 months in conscious violation of the statute and gets an automatic 30% reduction. From my Commissioner Floyd, I would take the guidance from you more than anybody and Commissioner Miletus. But, if you want to say something on this, please do. I mean, is 17 months too long to go with?
It is a long time, and not all the time though is it. It sounds hard to hear, but is it with malicious intent? It's just complete oversight, a huge oversight. And it obviously they need to tighten some things up here. I do have a question. this permittee, was it an expired service permit or did they just have never taken a training course?
Commissioner Floyd, that's a good point. In reviewing the file, this employee had actually worked at the premises for over 5 years, and so she did have a service permit at some time, took the test, did everything. So,
And it had just expired.
yeah, it had expired.
So,
Okay.
and they expire every 4 or 5 years, correct?
So, and there's no automatic ping in our system that's saying that this is not. If we have an IT system, okay, that solves the whole issue. Right then and there, it solves everything for us. I've been saying that from the beginning in terms 60% of the stuff that we're doing, we won't have to do anymore.
Chair, I sometimes equate it to like your driver's license. You know, a lot of us wouldn't even know that our driver's license it's expired and up for renewal unless you get something from the DMV a few months prior, and it's up for, because otherwise it's again, it's hard to hear, but it's kind of an easy thing that can get slipped in the cracks.
Well, your question was, for me, it's a learning experience. Your question was excellent because that does change my thinking a little bit. But that question has to be asked. And the other thing is for this commission when we discuss it later on today, is 17 months, even if it's inadvertent, do they automatically get a 30% reduction because they're good guys? You know, I don't know the answer to that question, but it's something that's what we have to sit here and discuss later today.
Chair, I always have questions in regards to penalty, and I know that the commission here, we don't have a huge staff to monitor every citizen of the state of Oregon when their license needs to be renewed. We do send out notice. One of the factors that we have here is we do have a system that sends out the letters, but we don't have the staff sitting at a desk looking at all these people potentially coming up at renewal. I had a question about why we gave them aggravation, because a penalty fee that's set by the state is a penalty fee set by the state, and I don't feel our commission should be here creating extra income for the state when I don't know that this person, that she could come in front of me and say for 6 months I was delivering a child and that occurred, or for this 6 months something happened in their life. I would like us to maybe we need to penalize the recipient of the license and not the business owner, because the business owner sometimes may not have seen it, but it's the obligation of that person who has the license to receive some hurt.
The license or the permit?
The permit.
Yeah, the permit. Yeah.
So I know we're gonna sit and listen about the new rules for enforcement later on, but I do know that in certain cases I have compassion for the people out there working, and I know for sure that this person at this facility probably is not the most wealthiest person around, or maybe even this business. Everybody takes a hit. Everybody. And it's our obligation here at the commission to send out those letters and notices and let them know that this is a required thing for you to work in this facility. And I just encourage us to continue to send the information. We've increased our marketing here. We increased our advertising. We increased our education. And we're going to miss a couple people. And I don't think today in 2019 we need to change our ways and go out and try to get more money and not educate at the same time. And so, and maybe look at the rules are changing. In the past 6-7 years ago, some of these cases that we were taking their license, we gave them a break because everybody has life. So I really appreciate the opportunity to share, especially with service permits. I have my service permit. When my license came up, I had an issue. I had to come in here, and the commission helped me renew it, and it was $35. It's not a big fee to get the new education, to understand what over service means, or what it understands when 21 means 21, or what it means to the content in regards to the blood alcohol level. But what it does mean for us is that we must have that educational mindset in what we do every day, and I'm appreciative that the staff, they do. But I would never require you to have or hire 5 people to be in front of a computer monitor and watching the sucker ping. No. You put it back in the hands of the owner, but if there's a penalty and that person doesn't have their license, have it go to the permittee.
Chair, I do have a question that you bring up a valid point, and it's something that I've touched base on before, and we'll speak a little bit more to when we get into our meeting with sanctions. But is there a reason why we didn't impose a sanction on the permittee?
Thank you, Commissioner Floyd. Yes, to issue a penalty or a sanction, we have to have authority over that person, and we do that by either a permit or a license. And so if one of those don't exist, then we don't have the authority to.
Because it's expired.
Yes. And so, in this case, we've taken action against the licensee. One other point to note is that if the employee had been working without a service permit for under 6 months, this case would not be put before you. It would be resolved potentially at a 40% reduction, and that is called the fast track option. So the benefit of that is that the licensee would have a 40% reduction off of just the standard sanction. Here, we're offering a 30% reduction off the standard sanction, plus an additional 2 days of aggravation or $330. So it does account for additional penalties, additional fines.
I want to make one point very clear. If I had my druthers, none of this would come in front of us. It comes in front of us. We're asked to make a decision. We are not, at least in my opinion, a rubber stamp. If we're a rubber stamp, then there's no reason in the world to have this here. And if we don't, I love the questions everybody asks. That's what this is. I'm trying to get that. I'm trying to throw everything against the wall so that we can have some good discussions about the thing. That's all I'm trying to do. But we're not a rubber stamp. And I don't think anybody should expect us to be. We have every right to ask every question that we want on here because you're giving us the authority to make a final decision on this. So it's incumbent upon us to ask these questions. You know, I'll vote for this one today because, you know, it's under the old thinking. You know, when we get this thing straightened out and there's still questions like that, I'm voting no on everything. If I think that there's no justification for it, I'll listen to Commissioners Floyd and Miletus when they talk about these issues because they certainly know a hell of a lot more than I do on what's going on, and my opinion will be greatly influenced by theirs. But I'm going to be asking a lot of questions on the marijuana too today, only because we're not a rubber stamp. We're not supposed to be. And every one of these questions, no matter whether it's Michael's or mine or Matt's or Hughes or anybody else's, that's fine. That's the point I'm trying to make this morning.
Thank you,
Clerk will
Commissioner.
take the roll.
Oh.
I don't like clerk.
I move to ratify, Chair, I move to ratify the stipulated settlement agreement for the Nest Lounge as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus,
Yes.
Commissioner Pasek,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to be moving on to the marijuana cases. The first case is Cave Junction Farms.
Any questions?
Commissioner.
Laura?
Oh, I need a motion.
Chair, I move to ratify the marijuana violation stipulated settlement agreement for Cave Junction as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus,
Yes.
Commissioner Pasek,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes.
The second marijuana case is the Herb Center.
Can I just ask a question on one before going further? I'm sorry about that. Just for my own edification, it says over here that failed to enter data in metric cannabis tracking system that fully and transparently accounted for all inventory tracking activities when marijuana items stolen on December 17, 2018 were not identified as such. So there were some items that were stolen for 4 months. They were asked to put it in the system or whatever it is. The question is, what happened to that stolen inventory? Was it ever found?
It was used. Just kidding.
Smoke.
What?
Up in smoke.
I said it was used.
Yeah, I understand that, but
Chair Rosenbaum, are you on number 2?
I'm on number 1. I apologize
Oh,
for
okay,
that.
we're
I
going
just
back.
want
Okay,
to ask
Judge.
a question on it.
Um,
It says that the items were stolen. And you're right, that's what I'm assuming. So the question is, not only was it stolen, but then they refused to put it in.
Chair Rosenbaum, in this case, there was a burglary at the premises that was reported, and inspector followed up the next day.
That's my question. Okay, there was a burglary.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on number 2?
No.
I have one. Under the terms of agreement, it said licensee, on number 1, under the terms of agreement, licensee accepts responsibility for violations as set forth in the notice. Violation number 1 was licensee's first category 2 violation within 2 years. Violations number 2 and number 3 were licensee's first and second category 3 violations within 2 years. Violations number 2 and number 3 were each charged at the first level because they were discovered concurrently. Any subsequent category 2 or category 3 violation within the same 2 years will be charged at the second level. So let me ask you a question. If this same circumstances was with another case we were looking at this morning, except that there were 5 violations rather than 3 or 6 violations. Let me read what the language would then say, is that these 6 violations were charged as the first level because they were discovered concurrently. So are we in a position of saying that, and no matter how many violations you have, if they arise out of the same incident, they'll be concurrently and therefore charged accordingly?
Chair Rosenbaum, that is dependent. The commission has the authority to charge violations on the same level or at a second level, and we typically look at the time frame in which those violations occurred. Oftentimes, an inspection could go on for weeks or a month, and so there may be several violations in a report, or there's a supplemental report that we receive after we've issued a charge, and so in that case, if the time frame has been, it's another month, it potentially could be charged at the second level, which we have done.
Nicole, you did that very well. And I understand what you're saying, but that's not my question. My question is, obviously what I'm doing this for. This comes in the discussion later today. Another case, the same as this one, same factual situation, but arises 7 different violations. The language would then read, because they were all discovered at the same time, not subsequent, at the same time, it would all be treated the same way. And therefore, one violation only has 2, one individual only has 2 violations, the second one has 6, treated the same way.
I think,
Concurrently.
can I my understanding of this when we've looked at these before is that the OLCC has discretion, so you can use discretion. So in that case, they might decide in that case that their discretion does not want to treat them as all level ones.
The reason I asked this question, so
Right.
you can think about it later on,
Okay.
I have never once seen, and they can tell me, I've been here for 2 years now, I have never once seen anybody that uses the discretion on the agency, it's all concurrently. That's what we have to look at. I've
Okay.
never seen another case. I went back and looked, I'll do that.
Yes.
I went back and looked, and concurrently is the standard. Now, we do have the discretion, but that's something that we have to look at today. That's why I'm bringing this stuff up,
Chair Rosenbaum, can I say one thing on that topic? Oftentimes when we go in and we do an inspection and say there are 7 category 3 violations and we charge each of those at the first level, so it's $16.50. If we were to charge those at each level, that would be cancellation. And so every premises that we would go into would be canceled. Maybe they have bad management, maybe they need to clean their premises up, could be a variety of issues. But that first instance that the commission goes in and does a full complete inspection, finds several violations, that would be cancellation. So that's just something to think about.
And I've said this so many times already. The one thing that's important is you cannot come back and say, look, if we do everything the way that you guys want us to do it, or we look at the book 100%, we couldn't even survive because it's just impossible to do it that way. I'm very cognizant of that. I'm also cognizant of the fact that we have to look. One of the things that we're going to be looking at today is if there's 6 different violations, okay, do we give a penalty on each one of those, or do we do the whole thing? I mean, that's the biggest part of the discussion today, is that if you have 2 violations, do you increase the penalty on each single incident or the entire situation? That's a big issue. But no matter what we do, we cannot look, at least in my mind, we cannot look at this saying we can't do it because the agency would break down. They shouldn't be coming in front of us in the first place and giving us the responsibility unless we take it the way that we should. All of us are cognizant that we don't want to put anybody out of business. Right? But we do really have to take a look and say, what's going to hurt somebody bad enough that they won't do it again?
Sure, if I could add, and Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, but when the inspectors go into a lot of these places, we've got a lot of rules. There's a lot of details, and some of these are really just details that people are missing. And so when they go in there, maybe they're going to find 6 details that somebody missed. So you got 6 violations, and then if we charge each of those individually, you're right. That's a big deal. That could be cancellation. So is the thinking essentially? If it's a first time and you've got a bunch of these violations, is it? I want to frame this the right way. It probably wouldn't even behoove us necessarily to charge those separately. Is that kind of the thinking?
Commissioner Melitas, actually, if there was several violations, we would charge each of those. So there would be 7. But they just would be charged at the first level. So
Yeah. Right. Okay.
the compliance history would capture 7 violations, which is a substantial number. But instead of charging one at $16.50 or 10 days, and the second at 30 days or $49.50, they would just be charged at the first level.
Okay, I got you.
That's a very important discussion we're going to have today.
Yeah, it'll be good to hear everybody's side of it.
Chair?
Yeah.
I move to ratify the Herb Center stipulated settlement agreement as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Melitas,
Yes.
Commissioner Pasek,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Number 3, Greenway Farm. Any questions? I'm glad somebody besides me have a question on this one.
I don't know if it's much of a question, but it's more of a statement. When I look at this, sorry, I don't have my glasses. The honor about, well, just going into the refusal of a representative to our regulatory specialist who identified
Not
himself.
once, twice.
To me, that's a big issue, because that really, beyond just a violation, it really speaks to a level of lawful respect that's needed in order to conduct this. If you didn't have that level of respect, for instance, just on a traffic stop, just imagine what the world would look like, right? That's a problem, among other things in here. And I don't have a question, but I definitely, to me, that's a big concern, because if you lack respect of the system, it tells me a lot beyond that. And this clearly demonstrates or underscores the fact that some of that respect is missing.
Sheriff.
Yeah.
The sheriff, he was off duty. So I have a question. What's the address or the location of this facility, Greenway Farms, and what city was this person at the auto body shop getting their car serviced at?
Commissioner Harper, I am not sure the location. I can certainly look in the file and find that for you. It's not in the notes here.
And in notes, did it say why she was identified? Why did this sheriff come up to her car? Did she? It was this. I mean, actually, my guy might come up to my car. What do you know? Why this off-duty sheriff felt it was his position to say, "I want to smell your car"?
Commissioner Harper, so the facts in this case are a little different. The permittee, who she was actually at an auto repair shop. She was en route delivering marijuana items,
Right.
and felt that her car
broke
needed.
down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So she was there,
Yeah.
and during that time, the officer who was off duty noticed that she had a duffel bag with marijuana in it.
No. He doesn't have X-ray vision. He noticed a duffel bag. Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he went in her car or she was actually holding it. That's not clear. But he reported it and to the OLCC, and we followed up on it.
Okay. So no other law enforcement. The police didn't come to the auto repair shop and do a full report. We just got a call for this report, if I understand you correctly.
I'm not sure if the police actually showed up there. I think a report was filed.
Okay. Yeah. And do you know if this young person or whoever that was knew this off-duty officer? And it says he said he was off-duty officer, but if someone comes to me and says I'm off-duty policeman, yeah, sure.
Commissioner Harper, it was confirmed that he was an off-duty
And she showed him.
officer.
He showed whoever the person with his badge and told her that they were off duty.
I'm not sure if he told her he was off duty. He requested to see the manifest, the transportation manifest that's required for transporting marijuana, and she was either unable to provide it or refused to provide it to him at the time.
Right. Okay. So thank you. That,
And a permittee.
So no on-duty sheriff came to that facility to arrest, to demand a manifest, to say anything to this person outside of the call that we received here that this had occurred. And when we got the call, we just responded to this issue. And when we called this company, they just confirmed that this occurred.
Commissioner Harper called what?
They called the OLCC to make this complaint from Greenway Farm.
I don't believe that she was arrested or cited criminally.
So
It was reported by the officer. There was an incident report at least, and we followed up with the licensee and with the permittee to get more details on it.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Harper, the one that I was talking about was that follow-up. visit and the refusal at the actual premises, not the
initial-
stop.
not the initial
To me, I had more trouble with that. I get the off-duty piece. But there's two elements here, and they are connected, obviously in this case. But the one that really worried me was, nobody's home, go away, and that was a problem to me.
Commissioner Pelsick, yes, that is a problem, and that is a Category 2 violation with mandatory suspension. The facts on that piece was when the inspector went to follow up, the licensee or licensed representative was on his way out to make a delivery, and he said you'd have to come back. It's bad. And when the inspector came to follow up, there was nobody present to allow entry to perform.
There's three different violations here. One a Category 1, one a Category 2, and one a Category 3. Any single time, I don't care what it is, when a officer or representative of the OLCC asks to go in and inspect somebody's premises and they say no, not once but twice, there's a problem. And in and of itself, that's a problem. You add on to failure to keep surveillance and then not have a manifest, there's a double problem, or maybe even a triple problem. The thing that I don't want to get to the point where if we don't make some changes here in terms of really egregious situations, to me, an egregious situation is when a representative of the OLCC comes twice to do an inspection and they're not admitted. If that happens, one, there shouldn't be a 30% reduction because of your good behavior. And two, I'm going to stop reading these things if it's a rubber stamp. And I don't want to be a rubber stamp on this. Now, I made myself very clear on it. I want to read this thing. If I get really to the point where something is egregious, I want something done about it. If it's not, that's fine.
Part of the problem, though, Chair, if I can
I'm just pulling it out, so that we can have these discussions. You know that.
Right. I do think that we need to be careful as a commission about being a fact-finding body when, for example, on this case where you said 18 months is egregious not for you to have a permit, and your mind, and maybe my mind too, when I was reading it, said, gosh, this person is intentionally doing this and trying to be a bad egg. But then when you talk to maybe somebody else who is in the industry, you say, well, maybe they're not a bad egg. I absolutely do not think our job is to be guessing their intent or their maliciousness from these facts. The agency is the one that is dealing with these people one-on-one. And when we get more background information, maybe that's what we should be doing, is to get more background information from the agency. But I do trust a lot of what the agency is doing. And we have to remember that they are on the ground. They are there making these fact-finding decisions. And so I find it very difficult to overturn the process that they have gone to when it is based upon a consistent method. And we can talk about changing that up. I'm all for that. But again, on this case, for example, when we're saying, this person automatically, because they wouldn't let us in, that now we've got some sketchy, black market industry, it could have been that they had, just as she said, I was going out for a delivery. And they're going to be penalized for that because it's wrong, but it doesn't automatically mean that this is an intentionally bad egg. So I think that we as a commission have to realize that it is not our job. We can't just read through this and say, I know exactly what they were thinking. That's not our job, and that shouldn't be what we're doing. And on here, when you clarify with the fact that it sounded like he had a delivery to make, well, again, that provides me some more background information that it wasn't necessarily, it was somebody who was engaged in business in the state of Oregon. He's going to be penalized for this, and rightly so, and so he won't do it again. and we'll keep monitoring this business. But I just want to be. I've said it again. I don't want to be. I think there's a balance we have to strike, and I'm not saying that you're wrong that we need to make some changes. I think we need to make some changes, but I really don't like when I read some of these things. Sometimes I'm like, oh man, these guys look bad. But
Mr. Chair,
Oh,
Mr.
yeah,
Chair,
yes,
if I may.
go for
Can I ask
See,
one quick?
we got a discussion going. That's what I want.
If
I should know this, but what's the appropriate thing for them to do? Or engine light goes on, the car starts smoking, whatever. What is the appropriate thing for them to do? Do they have to enter that into metrics? I mean, what is that? What do they have to do in the manifest? What should they have done?
Commissioner Miletus, I believe she's supposed to notify the commission of the stop.
Call us, or I mean, like I guess I'm just saying, like how should, if she's on the road and it happens, when does she notify us, or when?
That Commissioner Miletus, I'd have to get
Yeah.
back onto like the technical phone number or process.
Yeah, no, and that's Jennifer made some, Commissioner Kern made some excellent points. I think it is a mixed bag with our licensees. We have some fantastic ones, some that are still learning, and some that are maybe never going to learn. And I think that it's been extremely helpful to see it from an industry perspective, and also be on some of those inspections. And I think those are, it'll just add to our discussion. But I think Commissioner Kern made some excellent points.
And
Thank you.
I want to second that Commissioner Curran was 100% right in what she said. I'm not interested in changing the facts. I'm interested in the process, and to make sure that the process is one where we can participate in and feel comfortable. And the second point is, and she's absolutely right, is I think sometimes we need a lot more background on some of these things, because we're making assumptions, and those assumptions, I made an assumption on the permittee that just was wrong, and I would have looked at it much differently if I had that information. So the background and process is what we're trying to do over here, not change the fact that we're not in the fact-finding business. But we are the final
yes,
word on this, and so we have to feel comfortable in making it. Look at for something that could have taken 12 seconds and we would have been through all of it. We've been here for almost an hour, and we're having the discussion that's going to save us some time in the other room, I think.
I agree. I think these are great discussions.
Commissioner?
To the point of what is the process or protocol for, a traffic incident, vehicular failure, and you're off to the side of the road. But I'm certain to have the same type of thing with a knock on the door to the actual premises, and I'm sure that there's protocol that follows there. I managed a concrete plant back east, and I mean, it cold when OSHA arrives, what the process is, what you're to do. In fact, you can actually say, we would need to schedule that with you. You have the ability to do that. So there's a process piece that might exist there. I agree too that about the speculating or making assumptions or drawing conclusions without a lot of information. What I did have before me, though, kind of really pointed my compass in the direction that there's something not right here, and I want to make a level playing field for those that are playing the game by the rules. And in addition, I am supportive of staff, and I think that's why I brought up the point that I brought up. And if they're not capable of commanding respect in the field, that's a big issue.
Yeah.
And that's one that we should all take notice of. Anyway, that's talk more down the road.
Hey, Chair. Can I motion?
Make a motion.
Thank you. I move to ratify the Greenway Farm stipulated settlement agreement as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Kern,
yes,
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Miletus,
Yes.
Commissioner Posick,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. On the rest of the marijuana, does anybody have any questions? I have one very quick question, and that is on a letter of reprimand. It doesn't matter which one. If there's a letter of reprimand in the file, what is the net effect of that? If the person is giving up their license, there's a letter of reprimand in the file. What does that mean?
Chairman Rosenbaum, a letter of reprimand has the same effect as cancellation.
Right.
There's either an expired license or they're surrendering their license. It is important for the commission because it gives a basis to deny any further applications or to
Okay, that's
consider
my
it.
And can you ever think of a situation where a letter of reprimand was in there and a license was issued in the future?
Chairman Rosenbaum, yes, in certain situations, a letter of reprimand or a negative compliance history. There are things a commission can impose on a license, such as restrictions that would address the concern, the public safety concern, for allowing that individual or applicant to receive a license.
Is there any time limitation before that person can reapply for a license?
I don't believe there's a time limitation, but the compliance history, one of the factors to look at is the passage of time. And so if enough passage of time has occurred, then the risk might not be as great. But you have to look at it in the whole licensing context, and there are several factors that the licensing specialist would consider.
The clerk could take the roll on number 4 and 5 combined.
Sure.
If somebody would make a motion.
I move to ratify the stipulated settlement agreements for marijuana violations for number 4, 5, and 6, as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Commissioner Posset,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes.
Okay, we have one more licensing case for you to consider. The Horseshoe Tavern.
Would you mind giving some background here as to some of the complications, the issues that surround this particular tavern?
Yes. Commissioner Floyd, can I just ask a clarifying question? Are you asking for the background history of this applicant or the prior licensee?
It sounds like it's the area, correct? As well as the prior licensee. Okay,
Yes.
so there's kind of two issues here. One with the prior licensee, one with the premises, the area.
Commissioner Floyd, I believe it's primarily with the former licensee.
Got it. Okay.
That their compliance history had a history of serious and persistent problems, which may or may not be related to an area. In this case, it could be very well that this is a problem area, but certainly the former licensee had problems, and it's established a pattern that any future applicant would have to address in order to be licensed.
Okay. I do have a question, Chair, if I may. So, in regards to restriction number 4, where it says, any drink containing distilled spirits shall not contain any malt beverages, wine or cider, and shall contain an amount of non-alcoholic beverage that is equal to or greater than the amount of distilled spirits. So the beginning part of that I understand was probably, for instance, like a beer back, correct? When it says, any drink containing distilled spirit shall not contain any malt beverage. So, wine or cider. So I can understand that part, but I'm a little puzzled on the mandatory. So the mixer part, the second part of that is, so that being, you would need to have a non-alcoholic mixer. So juice, i.e. juice, soda, tonic, for instance. So for instance, a customer can come into this bar and order a bourbon on the rocks, correct?
I don't know if they could they?
Well, it's one.
But it says, but she's
And
right.
shall.
I guess that's because I'm confused on that too.
and shall contain an amount of non-alcoholic beverage that is equal to or greater than the amount of distilled spirits. So if you get 2 ounces of bourbon, you're going to have 2 ounces or more of a mixer.
Ice.
But it's ice.
That's not a mixer.
That's a good
So that
You can
person,
Oh, boy.
a mixer would be juice, soda, tonic.
Yeah.
Correct?
But on the rocks, that kind of confuses me.
I think
Water.
That's
morning.
not a mixer.
Chair Rosenbaum and Commissioners. Tom Mott from APNP. This is my case. Commissioner Floyd, to address your question, I think that particular restriction is aimed at preventing straight shots. So people don't come in and throw them back and get drunk and violent. And so when we include the language beverage, I think we would expect to see a beverage mixer, and I think we would interpret ice to not count as an appropriate mixer.
So a person couldn't have their bourbon, say it's a top shelf bourbon, they would have to put a mixer in it.
Correct.
My concern here is that I can see this being somewhat troublesome, in regards to a compliance issue moving down the road. Is that really, realistic? Yeah. I understand discouraging shots. I completely understand that. I'm just, all the restrictions here, the terms of agreement is a recipe for their success, right? We want to see our licensee success. And I just, when I saw that, it just it took me back a little bit. Is that realistic,
It's a good point.
restriction?
And we've had discussion about this particular restriction, which has been placed on other licenses in the past. This isn't novel. This is language that we've used in the past. But we have had a discussion in the past about changing this up to maybe to focus more on straight shots in particular. And that didn't maybe get in the way of more traditional cocktails like a martini.
Right, correct. And we're in Prineville here, right? So I don't know how many martini drinkers we have in Prineville. There might be, but I could see this being maybe troublesome for them if they have I don't know what their bar back looks like. I have no idea. But if they've got some really nice scotches,
Sure.
Would you want your Johnny Walker, with cranberry juice in it?
That's an excellent point. One thing to note about restrictions is that licensees can come back to the commission, and after a period of time, there is no set period of time when they can come back and ask to have restrictions modified or removed. But after a period of time, if they have been compliant and we haven't had, say, a problem with that restriction, they could come back, we could reevaluate it, and it could be lifted.
Good to know. Okay, perfect. I just, this is a recipe for success for them, right? And I see this as particularly, it could be troublesome from a compliance standpoint down the road. So just wanted some clarification. Thank you.
So this is a licensee that took over the Horseshoe relatively recently. Is that correct? Or
Correct. Commissioner Miletus, I believe they took over in February.
and prior to that, it was Rowdy Spot. His history of serious and persistent problems. That's
Correct, under the previous owners.
Yeah, and I think to Commissioner Floyd's point, I mean, it's like we've got some rowdy bars in Oregon, and I don't know that, and I want to frame it the right way, but when somebody comes in to try to right the ship, and they're coming in with a lot of restrictions that maybe are, I mean, I wouldn't assume that pouring a nice drink on the rocks would be a problem, but and maybe they don't either. And so I just think to echo Commissioner Floyd's point, I think we want to set people up for success, especially if they're taking over a community establishment that hopefully is they're able to right the ship, and we don't want to be overly burdensome on them. But it's just my sentiments.
Any other questions? During the last 2 months, we voted not this month, but the month before that, we voted on two situations that were serious and persistent problems in the bar, to the point that they all had restricted licenses. I don't know if you can answer this question, and I'm not sure whether or not we need an attorney general's opinion or something. But do we have immunity on these things? If we passed this type of a license, knowing full well the history of everything, is the state immune if there's a lawsuit that comes in the future?
I think I'd have to defer to higher up and maybe.
Because we're sitting here, being honest about it, we're sitting here fully cognizant of the situation. Now, this one is, I would say, child's play compared to the other two that we passed over the last 2 months. We had two really buttes of a case that we gave restricted licenses to. What's our liability in passing this? I don't mean OLCC, I mean the state. Kelly, do you have an answer?
Chairman Rosenbaum, I don't have an answer for you right now. This is something we have to consult with on DOJ. It's not something we'd be prepared to answer at this moment. We'd have to analyze sort of risks of challenges and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think
I'd be
it's
happy to take it back
worthwhile
to
in
them.
just looking into it, because quite frankly, we're apprised of the entire situation. Counselor, you want to make an opinion on it? Oh, you just walked in, Commissioner Curran? I asked a question that...
Yes.
Don't leave the room.
I asked a question that in the last, not this month, but the last 2 months, we passed and approved two really, really potentially dangerous situations in terms of restricted licenses in bars. And I wanted to know what the liability of the state of Oregon is, if any. And I don't know the answer to that.
And before you came in, Commissioner Curd, I answered. I don't have an answer to that question right now. I would need to consult with our contact counsel at DOJ before I stated anything on the record.
So you'll get back to us on
Yes.
it. Steve, you got any opinion on that?
Well, I just know we don't see a ton of cases against us that are going that direction. So I assume we have some protections under the law.
I'm
But I
assuming
can't
too.
tell you exactly what those are right now.
I'm assuming too, but I think it's a legitimate question, because we're up here passing on it. I want to know what the hell the liability is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will state for the record that when we do these settlement agreements, the applicant or the licensee has agreed to not appeal the contested case.
Yeah,
So
but that's
it's
not the
different,
same.
but I'm saying that we will not be getting a challenge in the Court of Appeals on this particular contested case.
The factual situation of lawsuits are something that we never know. Okay, are we up for a motion on this?
Chair. I move to ratify the stipulated settlement agreement for Horseshoe Tavern as proposed by staff.
Commissioner Curran,
Yes.
Commissioner Floyd,
Yes.
Commissioner Harper,
Yes.
Commissioner Molinas,
Yes.
Commissioner Possick,
Yes.
Chair Rosenbaum.
Yes. Nicole, thank you. And I speak, you know that this has no relationship to anything, that you do a great job. We just need to have the discussion. Okay. Okay. Okay, retail services.
Jim.
Good morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Brian is afraid to come up this morning, huh? We always like to see your chair.
I want to go back there. Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioners, for the record, Brian Fleming, Director of Retail. So at last meeting, you asked to see a little bit of show and tell for what we've done in Willamina. And then, yes.
I kept this one.
So did we. So what I asked Jim, because this is his store, I did not do this. This is his work. And I asked him to put in a couple others because some of the work that we've done with these expansion stores, new stores, is phenomenal. And so I asked Jim to do a little more than just Willamina. I asked him to do a little more show and tell on some of the work that he's done. Again, I'm going to go to the back here, but this is his work, and I think it's important that he bring to you.
Good.
So and he's done a great job.
That's
with this stuff.
fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jim.
Yeah, this is fun. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, well, good morning, Chair Rosenbaum and Commissioners. For the record, Jim Helgett, and I'm a District Manager here at OLCC. A little bit about the timeline Brian just mentioned. In April of this year, we appointed Ramandeep Kaur, the agent at Willamina. And last November, we did the 5th phase of retail expansion. And a couple of the stores in there were mine, and I have some pictures on those stores too. And then, of course, last commission meeting, a request was made for an update on Willamina, so we have that. Here are some photos of, on the left is the old location, which was at Skyberg's Lumber and Hardware. Isla and Randy Skyberg ran that store for us. Isla is actually the mayor of Willamina. And when we added the expansion store in Grand Ronde, that was enough for her to want to go ahead and retire the store, knowing that it would have a pretty significant impact, which brought us to the 3 applicants that we had for Willamina, and we selected the Center Market, which is across the street, a convenience store. In their proposed business plan, they proposed to create a new and modern space with new flooring, shelving, lighting, modern color scheme, and creative decor. So just a little bit about the Willamina area. There's about 2,200 folks that live in Willamina, and this store's annual compensation is about $50,000. So they went to work right away on the plan, and hired an architect, and built out a store within the convenience store. It has a separate entrance. And you can see here that they put in the new shelving and the new flooring and the new counter. Space is about 500 square feet. They did a nice job with the recessed lighting and the modern paint. They extended the hours. Adjacent business offers beer and wine, which is a convenience, and they added about 100 SKUs. They have about 600 SKUs now. And here is the little 500 square foot Willamina store with product in it. And they have about an inventory of $110,000 with spirits in there. This is an area map that shows you Willamina to the new store that we added in Grand Ronde. So Grand Ronde opened in March, and then the new agent took over in Willamina in April. And so if we look at Willamina sales for March of 2018 through September of 2018, same period last year, the Willamina store sold $267,000 in that time frame. The same period this year, which has the addition of the new store, with the impact there is $217,000. So they're short $50,000 or 18%. But our new store in the same market has produced new sales of $262,000. So the net gain's about $211,000. Some of that's probably coming from co-stores also. But here is some photos of the Grand Ronde store. This one's just past the casino and opened in March, done about $260,000. Also a store within a store concept. Here's some photos, brand new space. Again, everything is new. And we have a virtual tour on this one, so we'll take you through that. So if Laura's able to spin this around and give you a 360-degree view of the space.
What's the square foot of this one?
This is about 1,200 square feet.
Very nice.
Yeah, so this is the entrance. So you enter through the convenience store, and then this is a barn door that will shut when the convenience store is open and they're no longer retailing spirits. And once you enter there, they did a really nice, clean, bright, modern, well-organized, good retailers. So we're happy about
What percentage of customers do you have that just go into your store and not the convenience, or vice versa?
It'd be difficult to put a percentage on it. I mean, here you have to enter the convenience store. I could follow up with Vic and see how many people only ring spirits, but it typically lifts the adjacent business as well. The added foot traffic for spirits. Now they can get their soda and their mixers and a candy bar and other things. So it's definitely a nice bolt-on for the convenience store.
Okay.
Good. So they're holding almost $200,000 worth of inventory in there, 1,100 plus SKUs, and again about 1,200 square feet. And another store that we approved in fifth phase was Salem, South Lancaster, and this opened April 8th of this year. And that is down at Lancaster and Highway 22 in Salem. He put in about 2,500 square feet. It's also very new and modern, bright and inviting.
Who's the agent here?
This is Gurpreet Singh. The agent is Sunrise Liquor Inc. But the managing partner there is Gurpreet Singh. And his father-in-law and him went to work and did a lot of this themselves, including the unique wood accents that are above the shelving there, and some of the steel work on the signage. They put in a 30-foot walk-in cooler that anchors the back of the store. Since they opened, you have $887,000 in sales. They're holding about $300,000 in inventory in the store, and put together an advertising campaign to get the word out. So they have a billboard there on Market in Lancaster. They're in between Winco and Dollar Tree. So at the south end of the map, you see Sunrise Liquor, and then the closest store is the Salem East Lancaster, which we recently appointed a new agent there, Stafford Beverage. And so your distance is about 2 miles, but a 10-minute drive. And if you live in the Salem area, you know Lancaster can be bad at rush hour. And so looking at April to September of last year, the sales at the East Lancaster store were about $3.6 million. Same period this year, with the impact of the new store, see we've dropped about $250,000 or 7.4%. We do have new sales of $887 and a total market gain of $635,000.
That's pretty dramatic.
It is, and there could be attrition of sales from other locations, but if we just zero on these two stores as the control, then yeah.
In all the numbers I've seen, that's the biggest change.
But
Definitely shows there's
In terms of dollar amounts over here, that's not percent. That's a big change. That's good. I mean, we're getting.
You're not cannibalizing either.
Yeah.
Well, 251,000 loss for a store is a lot of money.
Yeah, and
So you celebrate the state, but you're negating the fact that this agent lost his money.
Yeah. Yep. Kind of reporting the news more or less on that, but the South Store, I think, has done a really nice job. They're on pace to hit about $1.6 million in the first operating year, and we think in 3 years you could be looking at a $3 million store likely in that part of town. So.
Well, the whole premise of these expansion is that there's room for growth. I mean, if we start seeing numbers that are negative, that's one thing. But there's a huge positive on this over the last 2 years. I mean, big time.
I agree. It shows that there was a need for more product.
And you're going to see some of these numbers go down, but that 635,000 is a damn positive number.
But
this will be
can't
another.
negate the fact that an agent lost $250,000 plus. So we can't. Sometimes you want to upsell something, but you got to recognize as long-term agent, business has been affected.
Commissioner Harper, this will be a fun one to watch because if you remember the proposal from Stafford Beverage for the East Lancaster store, he is not going to make it easy to be his competitor. So he plans on expanding that store to almost 8,000 square feet and significantly increase the offerings as well as income off of related expanded items too. So this will be a fun one to watch to see if some of the things in the East Lancaster store's proposal about increasing ring per bottle to generate more revenue and
will you give us a 6-month update in 6 months on these two stores?
Yeah, of course. Of course.
It really is a fun one to watch.
Yeah. But to your point about the modernization, which is kind of called out, I think we are getting improved access and convenience. You don't have to fight traffic across town on Lancaster to access spirits, and a little bit new stores that are modern, a new agent to OLCC and Gurpreet Singh, young man that's doing a very nice job, good retailer, and then putting together some increased hours too. So there's some benefits. Any other questions?
No, this is good. Thank you. Any questions?
And one last, we did have Director Fleming and Director Mayton visit the South Lancaster store recently, and I think they were pleased. And Director Fleming's been over to the Willamina and Grand Ronde locations.
Chair Rosenbaum, Commissioners, again, Brian Fleming. So I did go to this store because you had tasked and challenged me with this appointment. And yes, we did not get lighted glass shelves on the proposal. What we're talking about is a 2,200 population community. They over-delivered. Now, is there more to do? They have a piece left. It closely matches. Nothing, we get changes along the way just because of the way leases work and build outs. And to the comment of the loss in revenue, that's for the period. So over the year, Commissioner Harper, what we've experienced in a lot of these stores is at the 12 to 18 month mark, generally, with a couple of exceptions, they begin to grow again with the state. So there is some slight losses, but the incremental revenue that's been delivered, we had another solid month. We are doing better as a result of expansion and providing access to consumers where they may not have chosen spirits before. So,
you know what a hockey stick approach is in finance? When you give a revenue prediction, the hockey stick approach.
Slap the puck and see what happens.
Way over what realistically you should expect. So when you have 2,200 people, and I took a look at this, this was to me a hockey stick approach. What you guys did was very good.
I did not do this.
2,200, you did a great job on it. Me personally, I'm more than pleased, but this one I saw and I kept because this was a good example of what you were going to do. And you delivered on this as far as I'm concerned.
Chair Rosenbaum, if I may, are you telling me in this public meeting that we have delivered on what you'd asked for?
Yes.
Thank you. I had to get it on the record.
I am.
Good job, Jim.
Good job.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's important to us, whether we sit here and approve this, we'd like to see 6 months later what the results are, whether we're right or wrong.
Well, mine came through.
Steve, anything?
Yeah, I think I got a bit here, if you'll bear with me.
Sure.
There's one piece that I'd like to call Jamie up and talk a little bit about CBDs and our announcements on that. But before we do that, we're following up, of course, on your action on vape. We are enforcing in every region. I do expect that we'll have really great compliance on the retail side. A little more difficult in how we're looking at the processing ban and having to do that evaluation. But we're on it, and so I think we'll be working through that. But that takes a little more understanding of what you're looking at and where people are in production, a little more time, energy, effort to get there. But feel really good about where we are, and we're active today and active yesterday on that. So moving forward, the governor I haven't heard anything from Jeff Rhodes on the work group build out at this point. Expect to hear from him in pretty short order on doing that.
I know you're going to be on it. Is there any consideration for any other commissioner to be on it?
I have not talked to Jeff about the rest of the composition, so I've checked with you and get on that.
I personally don't feel the need to be on it, but I would like to see a commissioner or two on it. I think that's kind of important in a way.
I'll talk to Jeff.
We don't have the final say on it, but I'm giving you a good suggestion.
I'll just tell you, having experienced the work up to the executive order, there's a lot of time spent at that level talking about nicotine vape. And they spent a lot of time working that through where the issues, I think, are larger. I think one of the issues with that group, and Jeff's aware, the governor's office is aware, is make sure we get the focus on our part of what we need for solutions. To that end, we'll be putting together a work group starting 2 weeks from yesterday. Promised to have at least a work group together so we could begin to evaluate both the flavoring, the additives issues, also to begin to gain our knowledge about so we can think about how we're going to construct, potentially utilize the botanical exception that you passed in the temporary rule. So that'll be moving forward quickly. And I just want to express on the record, we had been working with the state of Washington to try to do something jointly around that, kind of combining our expertise and opportunity for training. I still am intending to invite Washington to participate with us on that. We have some common vendors between us. We certainly have differing expertise in that area, so going to talk to the governor's office about that. I don't know if we can pull that off in a couple weeks, though. So the best laid plans changed. Medical work group tomorrow with the House Trade and Economic Development Committee. It's a work group of the legislature, so we'll be meeting on those issues. We have been coordinating with the governor's Drug and Alcohol Policy Commission. They're in the middle of developing a strategic plan. Peter represented us this week at their meeting. We had a meeting in this room with on the home delivery and Representative Doherty's effort there, which is quite important. So they're working on how we would permit both sort of instant fulfillment delivery and potentially common carriers, so that we could permit and have a sanction if they didn't deliver properly to the door. And Chris Mayton has been taking on his new charge of working on agent compensation. We had a meeting with the agents on that. And part of that is sort of technical support for where they've been. A part of that is looking at meeting the co-chair's direction to us to try to get a longer-term solution to how we pay our agents, and something that's more durable, doesn't have to go back to the legislature at all times. I think we've got a very good start on that. Welcome, Commissioner Raval. We've got a good start on that process. I can tell you it's expensive. I can also tell you that they're realistic numbers for our system too. So we'll be working through that. You'll see more on that to come in the future. We've just really started on that, but I'm really pleased with the effort to date. Also, we'll be Chris and Will and I will be at ALSA's meeting at the end of the month next weekend. Just meeting with them. That's their association for a part of our retail agents. So then I'd like to call Jamie up. Yeah, should be fun. Well, if their proposal is something that they actually can get, I think they should feel quite satisfied. But mainly a focus that they feel like they're falling behind on their labor cost, and then the differentiation between facility costs between regions is quite significant. So it's part of the thing that we're looking at in our cost structure and compensation structure to account for that. And that'll make a big difference moving forward. But that's yet to be seen. So we'll do some more work, and we'll be able to show you some figures and proposals and what that looks like. But it'll be an expense, but it might be a way to actually move us off this justification every 2 years, and the argument for an incremental increase without a system that really captures those reasons for the increase. So with that, I wanted to bring Jamie up just to talk to you about CBDs. This is something, and you would have had more awareness and conversations had the vape issue not moved forward. I think she did do a presentation at one point to the commission on CBDs. So we'll follow up just about what we're getting ready to do with our announcement. We'll send you out the draft materials before we put them out here for your review, but we're intending to move before the next commission meeting. So I just wanted to make sure you were aware of this effort. Okay.
So good morning, Jamie Dickinson, Administrative Policy and Process. I'm happy to answer any questions. Just generally, we've been working for a very long time on providing guidance for people in the industry and for the public. These are things that will be published on our website. We've been working over the last few days. Staff has been creating individualized documents, so one-pagers for different parts of the industry. So a one-pager for distributors, a one-pager for retailers who sell for on and off premises consumption, one page for people who manufacture alcohol, because the requirements or what we're giving them guidance on are different. And so if we just kind of throw everything into one document, it might be a little confusing. So we tried to really make it as clear as possible about what the OLCC expectations are. And then additionally, Matthew Van Sickle, who is in communications, did an amazing job making an infographic. So it's a one-page document where you can kind of look at it. It splits out, just kind of gives little snippets, but it's something that can be, it's very attractive. It's nice to look at, and it's something that has information on it that maybe if you don't want to go through and read this long, bulleted list of information, maybe it's something that, people can look at and see. And so we have been working on that, and we are getting ready to hopefully put that out at least by the end of this month.
So
That would be good.
We've had some conversations on it. I mean, CBD is very interesting, obviously, because there's so many different, hemp derived, cannabis derived. This is just more of a sentiment, but I do think that in a lot of ways, this is sort of the bleeding edge of where cannabis is going to end up going. So a lot of, and we are in a unique position in this state, just in the way we regulate it. So I do think it's always good to be kind of mindful that we're setting some precedents here. And I always think I think it's great that you guys have kind of divided it out into the industry sectors, because it's there is a tremendous amount of confusion out there. And so I applaud that. Thank you for doing that. And as much as you are able to involve the commission in those discussions, I know from my perspective, it'd be very much appreciated. So thank you.
Is there anything we have to vote on?
No.
So
We're
this
just
is
putting
just-
out communication because, people are starting to use CBDs. We have one that's probably a compliance issue, at least for TTB, where there's CBD products or hemp products in a beer product that's being produced. More than one company, but a couple in particular that we have concerns are in violation of at least the federal standards and potentially
They're
our
not
state
allowed to
standards.
use it in alcohol now, are they?
They are not. Well, so that gets to, there might be one instance in Oregon. Jamie, why not?
Yeah, so Chair Rosenbaum and Commissioners. So if you're going to manufacture or produce an alcoholic beverage, you cannot take a cannabinoid and add it into the manufacture of it. But if you are mixing a cocktail for on-premises consumption at a retail location, you can take a CBD item that has been tested under state law, so tested under the Department of Agriculture's rules. If you take that product, you can mix a non-alcoholic CBD item with an alcoholic beverage in a mixed drink to serve for on-premises consumption.
So this is a change.
Yeah, and they don't have all the information because there's a whole lot of CBD products that are being used that aren't tested to the standards. And Oregon law allows it to be an adulterant, or it's not considered an adulterant.
Correct.
So it can be used if you test it to the same standards of marijuana. So it's very unclear to a lot of restaurants, a lot of the industry. This aligns, and in our own agent stores, we have some of those products that are now not under the federal guidelines that FDA hasn't promulgated yet, are consumable CBD products that is not allowed today.
So here's the $50,000.
So we're pulling them.
Here's the $50,000 question.
Mm-hmm.
Is it our alcohol agents or inspectors are now going to be responsible for enforcement of that at the bars?
Jamie?
I'm not quite sure what the question. So, enforcement of which piece?
We are requiring it of our agents under contract because we need them to comply with the law. So we want to make sure our retail agents do that because
what about the bar? The restaurant?
The bars, what we're trying to do is put them in compliance with the law. Now, how we'd enforce, we don't have a penalty schedule, or we don't have any a violation for the.
So, commissioners, so if you had a product that was, for example, like a marijuana-derived CBD product, which is not allowed, that is prohibited, that would be something that would be, when you mix that with alcohol, that would be considered an adulterant. We do have statutory authority to prevent the sale of something that is adulterated, an adulterated alcoholic beverage. So that is something that our alcohol inspectors would be able to enforce.
But what about I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. What about say, for instance, a CBD infused beer? Because, it's, for restaurants and bars, we have a lot of our reps out there that are, and a lot of our distributors that have this in their portfolio. And so where's the compliance? Where's the liability then land on the licensee, So Commissioner, that particular thing is in violation of federal regulations. So the TTB has regulations that require when an alcohol manufacturer is producing a alcoholic beverage that contains a non-traditional ingredient. So if you were going to make a malt beverage to have CBD in it, because CBD is something that's not traditionally found in beer, you have to obtain formula approval from the TTB before you even start making that beverage. So if you have failed to get formula approval from the TTB, you are actually in violation of the federal regulations. But they need label approval from the TTB, correct?
Yeah, and that's separate.
So if they're able to manufacture and make a beer, a malt beverage infused CBD, how is it getting to the distributors to then get to the restaurateur, the licensee who's purchasing this? And that's concerning, right?
Right. So Commissioner Floyd, there's two different things. There's the label approval and there's the formula approval. So the formula approval is required every single time that you make a beverage that has a non-traditional ingredient. So any kind of hemp product, whether or not it's allowed, so you can make a hemp seed beer, which would be approved by the TTB if it follows all the regulations. That still has to get a formula approval. If you're doing it with CBD, the TTB has come out and said they will not approve a formula that contains CBD. So first there's formula approval. But then beyond that, you also have to get label approval if you're going to sell your beverage outside of the state. So if there is a manufacturer of alcohol in Oregon that is only going to be selling their product in Oregon, they might not necessarily have to get label approval.
This is a little,
but they still have to get formula. So because that seems to be where I've heard the most confusion is these producers of the beer that has CBD in it. Their claim is, well, it's only going inside of Oregon, but you're saying that may be accurate for labeling, but not necessarily formula. So formula, it doesn't matter if they're just staying inside Oregon, correct?
Commissioner Millies, that is correct.
Okay.
And the even more confusing piece about it is formula approval is not always required, but it is required anytime you're using a non-traditional ingredient, which hemp items are always considered non-traditional ingredients.
All right. So for anybody listening, can you say that again? So formula approval is required if you're going to be using CBD in beer, even if you're just selling it in Oregon. That's
yes. Anytime you're using CBD, hemp seeds, hemp stalks, any kind of extract, any of those things, formula approval is always required.
And that's a federal thing that no matter how many calls we get, we can't change, correct?
Unless the TTB, unless you call it TTB.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about beverages that do not contain that are CBD, that no alcohol, like just a water with CBD, that's CBD infused? Could a alcohol distributor say, or a beer and wine distributor or a restaurant serve those, or is it because they have a liquor license? But could if the beverage itself is just water and CBD, is that allowed?
So Commissioner Leda, so there's two pieces to that. So if you are an alcohol manufacturer and you want to make a non-alcoholic beverage, like for example, you brew beer, but you want to make a root beer, non-alcoholic root beer that contains CBD. So that's one issue. If you're a manufacturer, there are potentially ways that you could do that. It is very tricky, and that person would absolutely need to call the TTB because there are requirements about whether or not they are producing in a bonded area. So there's all these very technical federal regulations that they would need to contact. We wouldn't be able to help them with because it wouldn't be our piece. But they would need to be following federal regulations in order to be in compliance with state regulations, right? So
but if they are not an alcohol manufacturer,
if they are making that non-alcoholic beverage inside an area that is used to produce alcohol, there are some tricky stuff. So that's one piece.
Okay,
so I'm just saying they would have to contact the TTB for that particular thing.
So it wouldn't be an issue if they have no alcohol affiliation, if they're just producing water and CBD.
Yes, so if they're just a CBD producer and they just make this, then they're under the Oregon Department of Agriculture. That's who they would have to talk to for that.
Next step up the supply chain, the beverage goes to a distributor that also distributes alcoholic beverage. Is there any consideration that needs to be made there?
Yes. So once a distributor or wholesaler, if they want to sell these non-alcoholic beverages, they should verify that those particular products are in compliance with state law. So that's Oregon Department of Agriculture's testing requirements. So any product in Oregon that contains hemp or CBD, if it's intended for human consumption, it has to be tested according to certain rules from the Department of Agriculture, and essentially they mirror the marijuana testing requirements.
Jamie, be clear, they don't have a regulatory program around that. They just require it, and there's a certificate of analysis. There's no one monitoring or licensing that piece, right?
Correct, but there is a state statute that requires it.
Okay, all right. And then the final step at the retailer, are retailers, restaurateurs, are they able to sell non-alcoholic, just water or soda infused with CBD?
So an alcoholic, if you're selling for consumption either on premises or off premises, so there's two different things that could happen, those retailers also still need to make sure and verify, especially if they are mixing that particular product with an alcoholic beverage, that it is also following state requirements, so that it is, they have to make sure that it comes from hemp. So anything on a licensed premises, if it is derived from marijuana, even if it's CBD derived from marijuana, that is strictly prohibited. And we have rules saying that if you use those particular products on a licensed premises, there is a violation for that. They need to make sure that they have a certificate of analysis that shows that the product was tested, and that would include a potency that would show that there was less than 0.3% THC in that product. And they should make sure that it, excuse me, that it does not come from one of our OLCC marijuana retail stores. And the reason for that is hemp products in our stores, our marijuana stores, have the ability to have a higher THC level than other hemp products. And so if they purchase something that comes from a hemp marijuana retail store, it likely has more THC than is required.
Okay.
Or
Yeah,
that is
thank
allowed,
you.
excuse me.
And sorry for kind of raking you over the coals there, but it's one of those things where it seems like an inconsequential issue, but there's so much federal overlap, so much confusion, and it's probably, oddly enough, the thing I get the most calls on, because it's like, it's an opportunity, but I think we have to be mindful that there is federal oversight here. There's a lot of moving pieces. So thank you very much, Jamie. That was an excellent sort of walk through the supply chain and all the different pieces of it.
Will you make sure all of us get all that material as quickly as possible?
And we'll make sure you have plenty of time to review it before we put it out, 3 days or something, so we can make and consider changes in it, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Here's my $50,000 question again. I'm going to go to Commissioner Floyd's restaurant and have lunch. I'm sitting at the bar, and I order a root beer with CBD. And then I tell him I want a Jack Daniels. So give me a shot of Jack Daniels, and I pour the root beer with CBD and the Jack Daniels, and an investigator from this department, alcohol investigator, sitting there next to me. What does he or she do? If he sees it, I mean, there's no way in hell that they have any idea of what the chain of command is from the manufacturer on. There's no way to determine whether the CBD is in there. What do they do?
So, Chair Rosenbaum, there are under there's a state statute and these administrative testing rules for the Department of Agriculture that require testing of these products. So, actually, the thing that the licensee should do is they should obtain the testing result for that particular product. So this is a certificate of analysis that says this product has X amount of CBD, it has X amount of THC, it's been tested for pesticides or solvents and all of that stuff. So they should obtain those documents prior to purchasing that CBD root
That
beer.
I can understand. My question to you is, now I'm talking specifically about Commissioner Floyd. She's got a lot at stake on here, okay? So if she does that for her restaurant, and she has a certificate analysis and everything else, should that be plastered on the wall?
Chair Rosenbaum, no. So an inspector could request to see these documents. So there are record-keeping requirements for these particular types of records, and an inspector could request to see those, and then the licensee would be expected to provide those documents to the OLCC.
What's more so concerning is from a licensee restaurateur standpoint, you know, you would think if it's in the portfolio of your distributor, right, and your distributor is willingly selling to you, you know, whether it's the CBD infused beer that's very popular and on tap at a lot of, has been on tap, as we know, on draft in certain places. But to your point in regards to a non-alcoholic CBD infused, that's kind of a hot trend right now too. And you see that, and any licensee can get this through their distributor. And so you would think the licensee would think, and maybe shame on them, but that it's in compliance. You know, your distributors send their portfolio to the licensee. It's you would be in compliance purchasing, and you know, so the CBD. One question though, Commissioner Miletus. So the CBD infused non-alcoholic beverage, if you have an off-premises license, you're in compliance selling that, correct? Just not where it gets a little muddy is if you take that to the bar and mix. You don't want to mix the two, the alcohol with the CBD infused product.
So Commissioner Floyd, so you can mix the two. There is nothing in our rules currently prohibiting a licensee from making a mixed drink that contains alcohol and a non-alcoholic CBD product. So to answer your first question, if you have an O license, an off-premise license, and you're selling these, you can sell these non-alcoholic hemp-derived CBD items. You can sell those, but you can also mix them.
Operative word hemp, though.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So long as they
Thank
have
you.
a certificate of analysis.
Yeah.
It's not, so the products that are available in the grocery stores with CBDs on the counters of everywhere, technically, if they're used in human ingestion, they're technically federally not legal, right? The FDA hasn't promulgated their rules, even though the hemp bill passed. So we are asking our retailers in our system to remove those products that don't have a certificate of analysis from their stores. So any of those drinks that are non-alcoholic in our stores will be removed because technically they're not fully regulated yet and not available to be used for human consumption. Jamie?
So we really want to, the point of this guidance, we really want to educate. We know that this is confusing. We know that there are lots of issues regarding this. And so the point is we're trying to really educate our licensees and help them to understand what is allowed and what's not. And I think a lot of people probably don't even know that there's a state statute and that there are administrative rules requiring the testing of these products. But that being said, although there are testing requirements for these particular products, because as Steve mentioned, they do not really have a regulatory scheme for this, licensees and just anyone in general should be particularly aware of where they are buying these products from because they may not be what they seem. So just because the particular CBD product has been tested, the CBD component has been tested as it's required to, the rest of the item is not regulated. So that particular, especially if it is just within the state of Oregon, because the FDA does not regulate anything that is just intrastate. It only regulates items that are interstate, so things that go between states. So I would just, every time I have a conversation with someone on the phone, I really caution them that there have been studies done of certain CBD items that are bought online or in products, and they test these particular items for things that maybe we wouldn't normally test things for. And there are dangerous substances that have come out of these CBD products. And I know that there are a lot of great people in the industry and they really want to do great things with this and they want to do a good job. But sometimes that's not everyone. And so licensees, particularly when they're mixing these products with alcohol, really need to be careful and make sure that they know who they're buying them from, where they're coming from. And I think that requiring or asking for this certificate analysis is just one step to see whether or not they're actually complying with state law and regulations.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Floyd, the beer and wine distributors are ahead of us. They want us to put this advice out earlier so that they would get those drinks off their distribution list because they're in agreement that they're not, the unregulated products should not be in the stream of commerce.
Yeah. Having been put in charge of this issue, you have lifetime security now.
So you can see why I wanted to bring it here. We'll send you the information, and hopefully, I mean, the infographic is really great.
Thanks, Steve.
I think it's very good.
Very helpful, actually.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Thanks.
Anything else? Any last comments?
I apologize.
Your apology.
I am a terrible grandfather, and I don't know what the hell I'm doing anymore.
Okay,
They're never going to leave the child alone with me again, they've told me.
Well, you look good. That's important.
That's golf.
I've been commanded to say the commission will take a 15-minute recess to reconfigure this room to a work lunch. I guess we're going to meet in here, right? That's what it says.